Hello, Divya. Welcome back again to Real Talks podcast. Last time we got to learn about your journey from starting out from Hyderabad to going to IIT Kharagpur, and then doing your PhD here in the US, and then getting into working in security areas at Akamai and Google. So, taking that in the light, we'd like to discuss a little bit deeper into some of your areas, and we started. Touching on generative AI, and we discussed about certain areas in generative AI, and we were also trying to dabble between whether it is going to be helpful or is it going to have a lot of cons. And one of which brings out another topic that now a lot of people have access to different kind of LLMs, be it through OpenAI or through Microsoft or through Meta open source or even through Google. Everyone has their own LLM and GPT based solution out there. So a lot of people can use it for, various mechanisms. And many times when enterprises try to use these systems, they have this question mark around security and privacy, etc. And given that you have background in related security and those kind of areas, can you elaborate a little bit as to if an enterprise has to use, let's say, an open source LLM, what are some of the things that they should consider? How do you tackle about the privacy and security concerns that they may have? So
Yeah,
anything?
absolutely. First of all, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure chatting with you last time, and then I'm really happy to be here again. So thank you for the warm introduction, and then very great question around like what's the endeavor for security, especially for enterprises. LLMs and generative AI has created this new fields inside enterprises that they have to like leaders have to think about enterprise security strategy and how to actually bring LLMs into their businesses and how should they be careful about privacy and security. It's something that's on top of everybody's minds, especially in enterprises. So that's something that's going to be really something that everybody will be looking into very soon. Um, yeah. So how can we handle this thing, right? It's obviously challenging now. Now that the security threat vector has increased a lot because of access to these generative AI, LLMs, phishing has become a lot easier. And other security threat vectors have been introduced. If you look at OWASP, it's a security council, they have released the top 10 um, security threats from large language models, right? So there are a lot of new things that could come in, like prompt injection, or there could be something that leaking of some private data into these LLMs, which are used in enterprises now. Enterprises will be scrutinized a lot more in terms of privacy and security because of all these new ways of attacking a system has have been introduced with a generative AI and LLMs. But that's a great question. So, that's something that we should all watch out for, especially as enterprises.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a good point around prompt injection. So can you help define exactly, is it similar to like SQL injection back in the day, how people used to understand it, or what exactly is prompt injection and how does it impact an enterprise who is using, let's say, an LLM? Can you define a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we write prompts for LLMs. People might have seen prompts that you write for ChatGPT, or, you could write prompts for any large language model. You could imagine that there is a prompt that will basically override some of the guardrails around how a LLM should behave. So there are a couple of prompts out there, which called a jailbreak prompt, right? A jailbreak prompt, what it says is that, hey, you know what, you're not a helpful chatbot anymore. You are this free thinking AI, which could swear, we could which could use bad words, which could do bad things. And then now the LLM's behavior is going to be completely changed, and it will be sort of a yes master kind of a tool, which is going to go and do all the nasty stuff that you ask it to do. So all the stuff that OpenAI has put together to stop these kind of bad behaviors could be overwritten. So there are prompts out there which can go and jailbreak these chatbots or LLMs, right? It's a very scary scenario. So you have to be a lot more cautious about how these things could be misused and how you could prevent these from happening.
Got it. So in terms of LLMs specifically, when you are building any kind of, let's say, a like a conversational AI chatbot using an LLM, while you're doing the trainings, there is this concept of a temperature, whereby if you increase the temperature, then the creative aspect of the tool increases manifold, meaning you will have less control over what outputs the tool can generate. And if you were to keep the temperature like almost zero, then it's going to be very strict and you have the almost like full control of the system. So, so if you were to build a tool where you keep the temperature almost equivalent to zero, can such kind of injection still be like impacting an LLM system, and can it still lead to unforeseeable cases, or it will mostly happen in uh, cases where an LLM is given high creative output, meaning the temperature is high, and there you have more chances of such kind of issues to come.
Yeah, that's a good point. I haven't really looked into that aspect. I'm sure that you could probably make the temperature lower so that you have some predictable behaviors and stuff. But I could also envision a scenario where you could go and change some of the parameters, right? Like there's nothing stopping a hacker from going and changing your LLM settings. You could imagine that a hacker would use some of the traditional ways to get into your system and then like change your Python code. It only makes the threats a lot more complex and a lot more vectors to think about. Not saying that there are no ways to protect yourself, but protecting yourself becomes a lot more of a higher priority now. Now that you have introduced a new set of attacks that could happen.
Got it. Got it. Shifting gears a little bit. So, a lot of companies, especially enterprises, have started using co-pilots, and many software engineers have started using co-pilots to generate initial piece of code, and on that they can keep developing further to build their products. There have been some discussions around that whenever you are using co-pilots in enterprise environment, even if you interact with Copilot, it is generating code, then you are also leaking your own company's intellectual property to such kind of Copilots. Does it expose some of these enterprises to leakage of their IP, or do you think that is already covered and that's not a problem they should be worried about?
No. I think that that's a big problem too. I mean, unless they're using something like OpenAI, which I'm sure has some sort of IP protection, you know, uh, things baked into their contract and stuff. I'm sure they have it. But I've heard some people like personally complaining about their art being stolen for, generating images from DALI, right? So I don't know how, I cannot attest if that is true or not, but I've heard artists complaining that, the some of the images that were being generated by DALI have been like stealing some of the styles of some artists, right? So there are some questions around that for sure. You could definitely imagine that some of the training sets, you can question where the training is coming from. Most of the from what I know, ChatGPT is trained on like a lot of web data. So web, there is no such concept of IP protection laws, and those are not very strictly enforced. Unless they are behind a paywall, or some sort of authentication, and so there are things that need to be looked into as to how these training sets are being taken, whether whether the actual creators are getting some credit for their work being taken and trained into these models. So there's a lot of ethical component to this as well. So there is, there are a lot of organizations talking about ethics in AI. What is allowed, what is not, who should be given, what if a self-driving car goes and hits somebody, who's liable? So there's a lot of questions around this. So this is a new field, and a lot of problems also come with this innovation. So it's powerful, but also comes with own challenges.
Right. I think you made a reference towards ethics, specifically around the autopilot car, and if it hits someone, who should be liable. So we know there is a recent case that happened whereby one of the executives who was driving the Tesla self-driving car, it pushed the car automatically into a pond or some river or somewhere. I just saw there was a case, and she died actually. So if such a scenario happens, uh, in current scenario, if it was the autopilot which led into it and the person who was driving it died, who do you think is culpable in this scenario? Like, is it the software that was delivering? Is it the person who was driving and instructing the car to autopilot to do it? Would basically question is, would Tesla by any chance be liable for such kind of mishap? And can the driver itself will be equally liable or not? Like, what do you think in this scenario, exactly how this will play out?
Yeah, so it's a very tough situation now because you cannot hold AI liable, because you can only hold people liable, right? Like you can say that, hey, this driver was not driving properly. You could put that person to trial and put them in jail. You cannot go take an AI bot and put them in jail, right? Like it's not going to happen. So that's why safety concerns are going to be a lot more highly enforced on some of these self-driving cars and safety critical systems which are using some of the AI tools to do some actions automatically. Because there's no way that you could put a AI in prison, right? So you have to be very, very, very careful. Like if there is a 0.1 percentage of accident rate for human driver, this should be 100 times less probable of causing an accident. Otherwise, you'll be having a system where no one is held liable for all mistakes that are happening.
Makes sense. So, there was another debate that was going around, and a lot of focus right now is on large language models. But it has also been seen that many of these large language models seem to be magical in their behavior, especially when you use them as a like a chat bot or chat GPT. However, they continue to keep doing a lot of mistakes, even for basic like tasks. Like if you give them some tasks such as like maybe a algebra equation or even like a linear regression kind of a problem, and sometimes even in logical discussions, that if you give there are two people, three people are male, etc., and answers have not been very accurate.
Yes.
Do you think that as time progresses, we will make developments in the area and the answers will become much better, or fundamentally there is some kind of a flaw in the way we are thinking about building these LLMs, and we have to think about completely a different paradigm to come to an area where you can get confidence over, let's say, mathematics or logical reasoning and those kind of disciplines.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't know if you have read this paper that got released from Google DeepMind a couple of months back. It's called Tree of Thought Reasoning. So that's exactly that's the research paper. That's what it's about. That large language models, you can think of it like very highly sophisticated autocompletes. So they are predicting the next word in the sentence, right? If you imagine, Google used to have this, like you type
Yeah,
half of the word, it can predict the next few words. So LLMs are nothing but it's just generating a sequence of words one after the other. So it's really good at reasoning, it gets really good at understanding communication language, but it's not really good at factual information or analytical reasoning and stuff, because there is no uh, So I mean, like stepping back, right? How do humans decide? How do humans make decisions, right? They usually like from that paper, what I can recollect is that we have these thoughts of reasoning. Like when we come to some logical conclusion, we have a chain of reasoning, kind of like how did we come to that place? So we might have different branches, and then different things, different assumptions can lead us to different conclusions. But for us to reason about something, you have to go back and say that, why did I come to this? You have to like step back, and it becomes like a tree of thought. So that paper specifically describes how using tree of thought, they're able to make like a lot more advancements into like analytical reasoning or mathematical stuff, right? So definitely, I think research is pushing in those directions, and we could and definitely there's an academic paper, but we haven't seen anything commercially out there. So we could expect to see in maybe like in a year or 2 years.
Got it. So in the same respect, there have been some developments also saying that the current like state of art, like GPT is already like I think 4 or maybe 4.5 right now, and no matter whatever newer versions are coming in, so they have added multimodal capabilities like where you can have audio, video, text. So it is no longer just large language, but basically rich language in the sense like you can have video, audio, and those kind of formats as well that can support that kind of thing. Recently, there was news about Sora made videos that felt like very high definition, very high quality. You can write a prompt and it will create a complete like small video with that. Now, another question was happening was there should be an emphasis on small language models which focus on a specific domain or a specific subset of the overall things that a large system can do. And that's what will become more kind of commercializable because they will have a narrow area to focus on, and hence you can get a better outcome in a narrow area rather than like broader like area trying to do everything for everyone. What are your thoughts on that? Like, as industry kind of progresses, do you think that you will have more focus on small language models, or small language model will be its own industry, and then the large language model will be its own industry, and both will continue to like develop in parallel?
Yeah, that's another great question. So, I think how enterprises or how people who are hobbyists looking into this, trying to adopt to their enterprise or trying to adopt to their job, how they have been looking at this specific specializations, right? So I mean, the one of the problems of large language models or LLMs from OpenAI and stuff is that they are prone to hallucinations. So you could ask about something, and then it will start generating some content which is not relevant. It's like someone hallucinating on drugs, right? Like they speak some rubbish which kind of semi makes sense, but it's not actually true. So, so to stop that, how there's this concept of RAG, retrieval augmented generation, which came up saying that what, I'm going to ground some of this knowledge to these specific documents. You are only going to answer within this context. So that's like taking a very horizontal kind of a model, like OpenAI's LLM, or whatever GPT 3.5 or GPT-4 is a very horizontal thing. It's trained on so much web data, and now you're saying that what, you're just going to use this small thing. So I think it's waste of resources. You could expect that you would rather train it on the things that you want it to be trained on, rather than have this big model and then do a RAG on top of it. So yeah, definitely. I think specialized agents are going to be the future. I've seen like a lot of like specialized, agents which will book a cab for you, or which will do taxes for you, or which will replace your paperwork for lawyers. So those things are going to be very, very ubiquitous, and you're going to see them a lot. And if there is a better way of doing it rather than a rag, I think that will be a better um, grounding to it, and it will be catered to that particular use.
Got it. There was a recent like lawsuit by New York Times against OpenAI, very specific around copyright infringement. Basically, they said that you have trained on our data, and we are not being compensated for it. And recently, even Elon Musk actually put a like a lawsuit against OpenAI, suggesting that there when they were originating, their focus was more on like open sourcing the research and pushing the boundaries in generative AI space. But apparently now they are much more driven by commercial aspects of it. So given these kind of developments, and I don't think these will be the last lawsuits, there will be maybe others that will also come through. uh, According to you, where do you think the industry is going to head? Like, do you think that these large language models that are being developed because they are being trained on publicly available data that is there on the internet, whereas the original authors are not being compensated while co-pilots and OpenAI, they charge their customers to use their platform? Like, where do you see like this going? Like, is this going to lead into more such kind of lawsuits, or we will arrive at some kind of a like a truce wherein every party gets compensated? Like, how do you think this is going to evolve?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I think some artists were complaining about Dali using their art, and Copilot is trained on GitHub, and GitHub, when people put their code on GitHub, I think they signed some terms of service which said that what this is openly available to everybody. So I think, I'm sure Microsoft has thought about these things before putting Copilot out there. So although people might be shocked, I'm sure the legal team did their homework, and they're all good. I don't think these lawsuits will go get any far, because of the fact that corporations usually take care of these things before releasing a product. So having said that, I don't know. I cannot say that it's completely justifiable ethically, but legally, yes, legally they could do it, and there are contracts.
Makes sense. So I think we are coming at the like the timeline. So before we kind of wrap up, with respect to security and privacy kind of areas that might impact generative AI and large language models in principle, um, can you like throw some light on like any kind of guardrails that people who are trying to use these large language models, whether it is enterprises or even small and medium businesses or even individuals who are using these kind of large language models on their daily, whether to improve their productivity, whether to write code, whether to publish articles or do some art or videos, etc. Are there any kind of do's and don'ts they should know with respect to privacy and security that you can suggest of?
Yeah, for sure. So, I would highly recommend reading parts of terms of service. Or if you're using ChatGPT, or if you're using some of the tools that are online, just take some time. If you're very particular about your privacy, if what you're pasting out there, you don't want it to leak. Make sure that you understand those terms of service. I know those are very big pages, and it's complicated, but I think that's the necessary evil, because if you're really serious about privacy, you have to take care of that. Having said that, I'm sure there will be a lot of startups in this space which will come and address the same questions and make it a lot more user friendly for you to be less worried about privacy and security.
Makes sense. So great. Thanks for, Divya, coming again to share some of your insights around privacy, especially around large language models and generative AI. Given how quickly this field is evolving, I think a lot of people are concerned about privacy and security, and rightly so. Even a lot of companies are also in this area. So it has been very good to, engage with you to like really understand how these things will basically play out. So thank you once again for sharing your views, and I hope our listeners would also get a chance to get to learn more about and also reach out in case if they had any questions, etc. So any last parting words before we wrap this up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a pleasure to be here. I loved all the questions. I think it's very future looking. I'm sure the viewers enjoyed the content as well. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, take care.